Thank you for joining today, and we will begin our final webinar for YSEALI Seeds for the Future 2017 into 2018 YSEALI Seeds for the Future program. The application deadline is on Wednesday. Today is Monday, so it's Monday evening. You have 2 more days to get your application in. And here is your chance to ask some final Q&A questions and get all of your questions for YSEALI Seeds for the Future answered. This will be completely user-generated, this chat, so if you have questions, put them in the chat window and I will get to them. I want to just give a few preliminary notes on what we're looking for. So if we can do this, let's see, I'm able to. So we are going to get going on YSEALI Seeds for the Future. And so I am going to take us, stop sharing, and we're going to go into the YSEALI Seeds for the Future website. So I'm going to go through final FAQ and just show everyone what we can be learning here. So you type in YSEALISeeds.org and it takes you to this website where you will learn about YSEALI Seeds for the Future. Most of you should have already been here, but here's the FAQ. We've gone through most of this already in our previous webinars, so if you want, you can find out more about the webinars. Learn more about the grants from the previous year. So here are 20 projects that have been chosen this past year, so you get to know more about them. Continue scrolling down, you get to find out a little bit more about YSEALI Seeds. But I want to take us right now to the application. So you click on Apply by November 15th. And here's the application. Most of you have already seen this and have started on this, but I want to just do a last minute click through. So you need to have a project leader, a project secretary, and a project treasurer. The description of the roles are here. You can only request up to $15,000 US in funding. And then you have to do one of the 4 key YSEALI themes: civic engagement, education, economic growth, or sustainable development. Projects should be from February to October 2018. And on January 18th and 19th in Jakarta, 2 of the team members will need to attend a kickoff workshop where we'll go through your budgets, your work plans, and your proposals again to make them much stronger to be able to really implement your project. But if we scroll down after we get the biographical information, you have to kind of tell us what your project's going to be about. And so where is it going to take place? But then we get down to here. See, these are the leadership teams, so each of those 3 team leaders. Your project abstract, you have 100 words to really tell us about your project. Project description, 1,000 words to really go into depth about your project. Your budget using the template provided that is found in the FAQ section of the Seeds website. And then supporting documents. These are optional, but they're very encouraged. So you have up to 5 pages to really showcase your work. Share with us anything about your project. And so a lot of you have asked how, basically a lot of you have asked, like, what is it that we're looking for when we fund a project? So let me see if I can cancel the share screen and come back here. And then I'm going to make the chat a lot larger, so it's going to become a discussion here, or where is it? Okay, so we are now talking about what we are looking for in a proposal. And so the 3 main things that we're looking for are something that is feasible. It means your project is something you can get done. As great as some ideas sound, we need to make sure that these projects are able to get done. So feasibility is a first major thing we look for. Scalability, meaning is this something that can grow? It would be wonderful if you have a project that can get off the ground and is feasible. but we also want these projects to continue after the October next year. So for example, of the 20 projects that we funded this year, already 12 of them have received additional funding for next year to continue. And we will help you try to find that funding and work with you, applying to other project or other grant funders or other foundations or other CSR projects. But for this reason, we need you to do something that can be scalable and implementable in different places. Then, lastly, we're looking for sustainability. Is this project something that's sustainable that without our help and without our funding can really continue after the deadline and after the project? So I know I just spoke for a little while, so I'm going to kind of go back through the chat window now and start answering questions. Continue please putting your questions in the chat window. I will try to get to everything. If you can't hear me properly, keep putting your questions in the chat window and I will keep answering them. This will go up on YouTube later tonight, so you should be able to get some answers. So Min Thoda U is asking how to participate in YSEALI activities. That's pretty simple. It's going to, if you Google YSEALI, you'll be taken to a U.S. Mission to ASEAN page where you can sign up and you'll receive emails about it. So Adinda is asking about the priority programs in the selection of seeds. What must the projects produce? And is this something we should see and touch in real life? So they can be training, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a tangible product out of the completion of seeds, but we want to see projects that actually have impact. And what does impact mean in this sense? Impact means that they have a direct effect on local communities. This means if you're doing trainings, if you're doing an education project, you train a certain number of participants and you let us know how many those are. We need to know what your project is doing and why we're funding you with the money. I hope that makes sense. I'll happy to share more if other questions come up. Adinda's asking again about the must be a YSEALI member. So to be a YSEALI member is pretty simple. As I was talking about joining the YSEALI community, it's signing up, and I'm going to put it in the chat window right now. Signing up on the U.S. Mission to ASEAN's page on the side panel, signing up to be a YSEALI member. Once you've signed up, you are officially a registered YSEALI member as long as you're between 18 to 35 years old and from a citizen of one of the ASEAN countries. Okay, moving down. Al-Hariz is asking about resubmitting a proposal. So yes, you can resubmit a proposal, but you should send an email to YSEALI Seeds, to YSEALI@culturalvistas.org. I'm going to put it in the chat window too. This is our official email box for YSEALI Seeds for the future. And I will, if you send an email in asking us to disregard your first application and then to send us a confirmation number of your second application, Al-Hariz, we shall be able to switch it for you. For the budget, do you have a prescribed or ideal percentage between budget item categories is Owen's question. So Owen, it doesn't necessarily need to be prescribed or determined between, just you need to make sure for your project it makes sense. What this means is we have the opportunity for you to move up to 20% between the different projects, but if you're putting all $10,000 to $15,000 towards travel, we might question how this project could be sustainable. There needs to be a kind of a balance because there are other costs, supplies, direct costs that will need to be done for your project. So without knowing your project specifically, I can't directly comment on it. However, there should be a nice little balance. There's no ideal percentage though. It depends on each of the projects. Juan Thanwarat is asking, do we require all 3 members to be YSEALI alumni? That is a great question, Juan. And so this is something I want everyone to hear and understand. You do not need to be a YSEALI alumna to participate in YSEALI Seeds for the Future. If you are on the message list and you have received word about YSEALI Seeds for the Future and you're within the age range, you are a YSEALI member. And so you don't have to have taken part in a previous YSEALI program to participate in YSEALI Seeds for the Future. In fact, we encourage applications from new YSEALI participants. Juan's asking, do we have to provide the CVs of all three members? It is highly, highly recommended to provide the CVs of all three project team members. That way we know there is buy-in from multiple ends. Stephanie is saying, can we submit our project before November 15th? Yes, you can submit your project anytime. And Anto's question is, can two of the team members be siblings if they have different backgrounds and skills? Yes, there's no problem with that as long as they are both YSEALI members. Owen's asking about feasibility. If they're building a social enterprise, will signs of initial traction be helpful? Yes. So for social enterprises, I think this is a good example that we can kind of delve deeper into. A social enterprise needs to get off the ground, needs to have other people interested rather than one fund, because otherwise it's not going to be sustainable. So you can show how the YSEALI Seeds funding will kind of give you the kickstart that you need, but you have to have a plan in place for growing beyond that. And so I think for a social enterprise, having signs of initial traction would be very helpful and encouraged to show that growth is possible. Hester is asking about my project description will have more than 1,000 words to convey the message. Is that okay? So this is a great question. I think this is something that all of us are struggling with and all of the projects are struggling with, because 1,000 words is not too much. It's a small amount. And so to convey your message within 1,000 words is difficult. But that's the point of this. If you go over the word limit, a lot of applications ask for specific word limits and specific limits on page numbers, etc., to see if you can follow rules. And this is part of doing due diligence while having a grant, is being able to follow the rules. So if we say that if the application asks for 1,000 words, make sure you keep it to 1,000 words, because that will signal to the grant funder that you will also turn in your reports on time, that your budget will be on target and won't be high or low. That way we can see that you will really be on target for your project. So while that you are at more than 1,000 words, work hard over the next 2 days to try to cut it down and make it shorter. Resky's asking, if we make the proposal that event will be in Jakarta, can we change the location in the future if we have another So you don't have to. Resky's question is about the Jakarta kickoff workshop, where 2 team members from the leadership teams, hopefully, will be going to Jakarta in mid to late January for a boot camp on their project and really making their project grow to be feasible and sustainable. Last year, the boot camp was in Bangkok, and so we're moving it around ASEAN to make it easier for certain people from different countries to attend. All charges related to that workshop for the team does not need to be included in your budget. That comes out of the larger YSEALI Seeds for the Future budget. And we will work with all the teams and book their flights and their hotel to get to Jakarta and everything. So it will not be additional funds or charges to your team. And then there, the team members will get to meet the other cohort of YSEALI Seeds for the Future, but also really get to grow their project and listen to other people and have new ideas to make their project more sustainable and more feasible. Fuad's question is, what are the differences between civic engagement and sustainable development? I think this is a great question as well. So I will go into Fuad's question in a little bit of more detail than his own, um, where we have civic engagement, sustainable development, economic growth, and education. A lot of times these overlap, and on good projects, overlapping is good. This means that sometimes a project seems like it's a mix between civic engagement and sustainable development. Sometimes a project seems like it's a mix between education and civic engagement. Choose whichever lead for when you're putting it down that you think your project went deep down in your heart of hearts, what your project really impacts the most. So is it an environmental program? Then it's probably a sustainable development one. Is it really about raising awareness and getting people involved to participate in government? Then it's probably civic engagement. These aren't fixed terms, so whatever you choose, don't feel that you're necessarily obligated to defend it under that framework, but it's a way for us to get an initial call of your proposal and what you're focusing on. And then the other thing I wanted to just talk about is that some of these projects don't necessarily fall under any of them, or they don't seem to. Well, you have to kind of explain why they are. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about here is that there will be one project chosen from each country at minimum, and then 10 next best projects throughout ASEAN. So if you have team members within your team, and you have a leadership team member that is from Brunei or Singapore, one of the smaller ASEAN countries, you may have better odds listing them as your team leader rather than team treasurer or team secretary, because there is a quota for one project per ASEAN country with the team leader. So if you have team members from different ASEAN countries, you may want to be strategic about who you're choosing as your project team leader. Amwalog's asking about, is 250 participants good enough or too much? It really depends on the quality. With YSEALI Seeds for the Future, we've done a major focus this year on quality over quantity. We want participant numbers, but only if they are good participant numbers, meaning that they've actually made an impact. Impact matters here. Our stories matter. We could have impacting 5,000 people, but if it's just them coming to a room and never talking again, that doesn't really show impact that we need. And so we want impact. So if you impact 40 to 50 students, but really if you're an education project and you raise their grade level by 6 grades in that time frame, 40 participants is good enough. But if you're a school and you're starting up and you have 1,000 participants, that's also great. There's no direct number that is necessarily going to make your project better or worse. My email that is registered in YSEALI is different than the one I use now. Resky, that's all right as long as your name and your personal information is registered with YSEALI. How do we know when your submission has been received? Do we get an acknowledgement email? And are there interviews after document evaluation? So I'm going to answer these two together. If you click through and you are on the form site and you click submit and you get to that page where your application has been received, that's the page where you know after you click submit and you get to the second page, that's how you know your application has been received. We don't send out an acknowledgement email, and there's no other way of knowing. But if you click submit and it goes through, that's how you will know. And then about interviews, there are not any interviews. This is why it is so important to be concise, clear, and thorough in what you put on the paper. Because there are 3 rounds of review of your applications after the initial submission, and those are all done based on what you submitted. There are no interviews for this. So what you put down on the page is all we're going off of. And so for that reason, we have to know what your stuff is. Can I put all the specific details of the project budget in the project description? And then on project budget, we put the summary of the whole budget. You can do that, Hester. I could also suggest that in the 5 additional pages you have, you do some sort of a budget narrative, where in those 5 specific pages you add, you give the specific details of the budget so it doesn't take away from your project description. Owen's asking for equipment to use like a projector or computer set and other items for production. Can that be funded? Yes, as long as you clarify why that is needed for your project and how it will impact your project. Usually large pieces of durable equipment we recommend try to be cost shared because that shows there's real buy-in from multiple parties. But if you show it's certainly necessary, then that is great. Juan's asking about, can a member exceed 35 years old? Like, can professionals apply? They can be over 35 years old. However, they should not be on the project leadership team. They can still just be on the project team. As for professionals applying, we encourage professionals to apply. This project is anyone of the YSEALI age within YSEALI Seeds for the future. Does the format for the 1,000 or 100 word description matter? Word, PDF, etc. We would prefer PDF, but Word works as well. Either are good. Adinda, I'm sorry if you can't access this. Will be on YouTube after. Everyone else seems to be able to hear okay. Elizabeth is asking about, in the sample budget, what can be listed as personnel. So I'm going to put in a link to the YSEALI Seeds for the Future budgeting template, because we did this video already where we did a webinar last week, and that one kind of shares the information on YSEALI Seeds for the Future budgeting, so I don't want to get too far into it right now. But it will tell you what really can be listed as personnel, but that's any funds that you're using to pay a trainer or anything. It can't go to staff salary. Lahoot's asking, what do we look for from projects? Feasibility, scalability, sustainability, and impact. Those four things are really the biggest things. Sri's asking, is there an age calculator to check of eligibility of the project? Are you within 18 to 35 years old and a citizen of ASEAN? Is the only eligibility really necessary? Kopchai has a great question. Are there quotas allocated to each theme, like 5 for each of the 4 themes? There aren't necessarily, but we do try to look to keep them specific projects for each. But it may end up being, there will at least be 2 of each theme. But no, there is no specific quota for each of the themes. What level of detail do we ask for you to describe, especially in the project detail and timeline? That's a great question, Lahoot. The more detailed you are, it shows us how feasible your project is. So, if you give us more information, we can see that you guys are on your way to really starting your project and making it feasible and sustainable. However, we understand there's only a short amount of pages you can put stuff down for. So, you have to do that fine balance and say how you're doing it there. Precious is asking, what happens if the budget is not consumed by the end of the period? Well, so that is a great question, Precious. So for some of the projects this year, I will use them as an example. They have workshops that are in November or December or moving forward. Those funds go to sustainability funds and the future of the project. We don't want these projects to end at the point where October hits. We want these projects to grow and continue after the seeds timeline. As a result, you're able to spend funds afterwards, but it just doesn't go in our final reporting that you do for the YSEALI Seeds program. So it's okay, we want projects to continue afterwards. Owen's asking about the Jakarta boot camp. If we're collaborating with people beyond 35 years old, can they join the workshop even if we pay for it? That's a possibility, and it's something we'd have to talk about after and see the specific scenario based on your own team. Oh, I apologize, Resky. So Resky was asking about changing locations to different places. That's part of replicability and making your project something you can grow and do in different regions of the ASEAN. So yes, that is encouraged. Sri is asking about how many CVs do you need to submit. Only the 3 key people are the CVs we need, just because otherwise it becomes overwhelming. But it's great that you have 10 team members already. Yeah, so Superman's question is, will the proposal be selected by the YSEALI committee in every country in Southeast Asia? Yes, so that will be one round of the selection here. So for that, it will go to U.S. Embassy folks, it'll go to people at East Asia Pacific at U.S. Department of State, and Cultural Vistas all in collaboration will kind of come up and do the different rounds of vetting. Hester's asking, could we have 5? If you have a platform and then 5 activities after, yes, that can count for your YSEALI Seeds for the Future project. Lucas is asking, can we use and include a reasonable amount for office or co-working space and an honorarium for team members? So there's no honorarium for team members because that would be like a salary, but you can do meals and meeting space. Yes, you can charge, but you can't give them a salary, but you can pay for their meals and such. The Hoot's asking, co-working space and entertainment costs, are they allowed? Entertainment gets a little fuzzy, but co-working space is allowed because you guys need to meet. Amolog's asking, how many applications will you get/receive? Last year we had 400 applications for the 20 projects selected. This year we're expecting around the same amount or more. If the project lasts for 5 years or more, will it be funded? It can be, but you have to be very specific, Elizabeth, in saying why you need the seeds fund for this year and what will be taken care of this year in the project. Hester's asking, what are we looking for in a project leader's CV? That they're focused and ready for this project, that they can take it on. Basically, we want to know that they have experience within this area of interest, so they are possible to take care of these. Falzan's asking, can we include workshop space in the rent for the budgeting? Yes, you can. Winners will be announced in early January, Amolong. Falzan's asking about, can we add an additional page in the budget form describing our budget intentions? Yes, and we would encourage that to be in the additional 5 pages that you submit, and we would call that a budget narrative. I think I answered Noose Rule's question about what we're looking for in the CVs or resumes. Basically that they're YSEALI age and that they have the experience necessary to make the project happen. Elizabeth's project will recruit 20 volunteers. The location is quite far from the city. Will travel costs and meal fee for the event be covered? Yes, that can be listed in your budget. Monoram's asking if we want to create a community art piece using the walls of building halls with owner's agreement. Is this legitimate? Is it okay to count painting material in the budget? Artist compensation? Yes to everything there, as long as it is reasonable costs. All of that sounds like a good project without knowing any more about it. Sylvanara is asking, I would love for me to explain a little bit more about cost share with local partners. It means cost share will be what percentage, how do we manage the financial report, since the report will be given only. Okay. So cost share is showing what kind of money can go into this project from other sources than the YSEALI Seeds for the Future. For example, if you're doing your budget and you think that you're going to need $25,000 US to make this project successful, how you got to show us how that other 10,000 will come to be, because otherwise we think, oh, this is a great project, but we're giving only 15,000 and this project won't get done otherwise. So cost share is the part that fills in the gap. If you're using your own, for example, one thing that can be cost shared is that honorarium for a staff salary. Staff salary can't be covered by YSEALI Seeds for the Future, but it can be covered by cost share if someone else is willing to pay for your salary. And it's all on your initial application. It doesn't necessarily need to be fully fledged out, your cost share. However, you should give us an estimate for what your cost share should be. Stephanie is asking, should the CV must contain 3 member CVs? Yes, that is encouraged. Jason's asking, is it possible to pass on the project to other people after the implementation period? Correct, you can do that. That shows your sustainability. Can we submit the budget with 2 columns of cost, 100? Yes, that is very encouraged as well, to have your cost share shown to show us where your funding is coming from. How do we handle projects across multiple themes? So the themes are only really for when you're applying for your project. Afterwards, it's not so stringent for how you will implement them. So if you're working across multiple themes, don't worry. That'll be okay, and so you don't really need to work that much. Lahoot's asking, what is the key differentiating factor you would find important to note in the 1,000 words description which most applications miss? That's a great question. So I think, Lahoot, something that I look for in there is the reason why. A lot of projects talk about their issues, talk about things plaguing their local areas, but they don't say why they want to do it. And if you tell us why you want to do it and show the buy-in, that's something that I find as a differentiating factor. Because then we know you have buy-in and you're going to actually do it because you think it's something that is necessary for your local area. The other thing I would do is a brief paragraph describing who the team members are and why they were chosen for their specific roles. We know in the resumes we get a little bit about them, but we don't understand why they were chosen for the roles and how they met or what they have in common. The more information you can fit in there, the better off. Lucas, yes, that would go in the budget narrative where you can explain the cost for items over $50. Yeah, moving down to Jerry's question. On the quota question, if project leader is from a smaller country, i.e. Singapore and Brunei, but the program location is outside of these countries, how does this affect the quota? So we would prefer, that is okay, it would work, but to get the, we want projects that take place in these countries as well. So it should have some impact or have participants from those countries. Basically, we want to make sure participants are from all 10 countries are represented in YSEALI Seeds for the future. Do we need to add duties and responsibilities of each team members? I think I just answered that. It does take up a lot of words, but a short paragraph explaining who's responsible, or in your additional documents having a showing a work plan showing who's responsible for what is very helpful. It could be in a chart form. Precious is asking, is it necessary to state who the stakeholders and partners will be in the project description? Will it weaken the application if we don't? Only if you can fit it. That's a big question there. Otherwise, if you can't fit it, then it won't hurt your application necessarily, but if it's important, please include it. Firdaus is asking, one challenge was encouraging virtual manpower. How did the other teams manage members from other countries? So this is really a difficult thing, and it's something we will work on in our Jakarta workshop, but it's cross-country collaboration. Collaboration is a key YSEALI theme now, and we want to encourage you to work on your communication skills to be able to really go across border and understand. Amalong's asking, can we use the YSEALI fund to pay for videographers, photographers to cover our event? Is $300 too much? $300 sounds about right for that. There will also be perhaps a YSEALI Themes for the Future update for 2018 where there may be video projects from cultural vistas to video this. So Just keep that in mind. Our collaborators can only, that sounds right, along without going too much into detail there. Falzan's asking if your budget is less than $15,000, is it okay if you don't have cost share or other sources of funds? Yes. So Falzan's question is actually a great one, and I would encourage all teams to take note of this. You do not need to request the $15,000 total. $15,000 is the maximum amount that can be requested, and the projects that are more feasible usually request less than $15,000. You need to show exactly how much your project is requesting from YSEALI. And if you include cost share there too, it shows us that you're really buying into it. Sri's asking, what if one of the key people cannot attend the January training? Can we be replaced by someone on the team who's beyond 35? Well, there are only two team members from the key leadership team need to attend the January training, and we can work with you and see who on the team member can join if those people can't make it. The treasurer doesn't necessarily have to be familiar with accounting processes. They need to be organized. They need to be able to keep their receipts in line, keep reporting correct, and really be detail oriented. It's a good learning opportunity for a lot of people. Rescue's asking, what do we look for in supporting documents? Supporting documents is your chance to wow us. Show us pictures, charts, graphs, work plans, anything. This is really where you can show us what your project can do beyond what we're normally asking for in 1,000 words. If you have pictures, great. If you have video link, cool. We might not necessarily get to look at it, but I think like if you have something that is innovative, put it in there. That is where you can really wow us and showcase your project and your idea to take it to the next level. Will there be mentorship, training, or supervising you can contact? Will there be collaborative midterm meeting with initiative members or representatives other than the kickoff? So all of the above, Lahoot, there will be. So Cultural Vistas will be providing mentorship and training and support throughout. We will reach out to the YSEALI Network and Cultural Vistas Network, both over 100,000 alumni strong, to kind of give advice and support to your projects in ways that will help you. Additionally, there will be a check-in meeting midway through the project, right after you submit your midterm report, where Cultural Vistas will meet with your team and really see how it's going and then work with you through your work plan and your budget and see if there's anything that needs to be changed to work. There will also be monthly reports and bi-weekly check-ins with Cultural Vistas. So you'll have a lot of support, and if you need advice, a lot of people to go for. Dawan's asking, how can I illustrate the budget in separate intervals? Do I separate the... So you don't need to do it in separate intervals. Dawan's asking about because we send out the funds in 3 different intervals. We send out first 60%, then 35%, then a final 5%. But you don't need to do it. Just keep your overall budget that you're submitting to the number, and you'll just receive them in intervals. If you need certain parts of the funding earlier, you can submit questions asking for it. Stu's asking where should it be the participant's responsibility allocation. That can be listed either place, either on the supporting document or on their CV. Hester's asking, what is the success rate of getting funded each year? We chose 20 out of 400 projects last year, so it's not that high, but it's not that low. If we're engaging people to develop a website, where would that count in the budget, since we can't pay honorarium? You can pay honorarium for a web developer or something like that, but it doesn't need to be, doesn't necessarily need to be that high. If it's too high, it kind of scares us away. What if my co-founder is not the project secretary or treasurer? Could he join the workshop? Depending on the role in the project tester, that could be arranged. It's something that once selected, we will work on and talk to you about. Should there be IT systems that need to be done for the project and team members can develop the systems? Can we charge allowances for the development period? Would this be considered cost share? Good question, Owen. So something I would say here is um, think about it in the way if you were the funder. What things do you think could be funded? If you think it's something that's necessary, that'd be great. But if you think it's something that's like that someone else could do or you could get a volunteer to do, try to make that cost share. It's what is necessary to make the project successful. Along, perhaps the problem with having a third person for the kickoff workshop is there are only hotel rooms booked for 2 members per team. So we can discuss that later. If we want to try innovative home biogas kit that could be shipped abroad to study it, is $1,200 too much? Without knowing too much, I would be wary, but I don't know. It depends. So try to explain why it's necessary in your budget or in your project description why you have such a large charge for that. Let me see the next question. Paper size, it doesn't matter because it's all going to be digital. So A4 or A4 is perfectly fine, or 8.5 by 11, normal copy paper. Sri's asking, my entrepreneur involved in the project is from Southeast Asia, India, and New Zealand. That is okay, but it doesn't. But your key activity should be located in Southeast Asia. The project should be a Southeast Asia-based project. Could you put workshop rent or cost in the budget? You can, Falzan. No problem. I see we have multiple attendees writing now, so we finally reached all the questions so far. Anto's asking if you see most startup highly cost on web development and more mobile apps development. How high can YSEALI allow on this development? Because it might take you closer to 1,500 or 2,000 to make a decent app. If the app is your main product that is coming out of the YSEALI Seeds for the future project, then you can use up to $2,000. That would be a large cost and a large piece of durable equipment, but it makes it reasonable for your project if that's your main output. So you have to weigh the cost going in to your outputs and showing why these are necessary. The Kopcha is asking if the budget narrative and the budget sheet have to be separated. Not necessarily. You can attach it to your budget so it doesn't go into your 5 pages, but if you have room in your 5 pages, you could put it there. Can you put allowance for facilitators? You can, Amalam. It just shouldn't be too high. Thu, can Thu insert links to website, clips, or articles in the 5 pages of supporting documents to elaborate the ideas further? Is the reader willing to click and explore? You can certainly, Thu. It may actually help if you get down to the final selection phase, so putting as much in as possible. However, I would say they need to also be explained in those 5 pages and not just say see link, because I think some of the judges may be willing to click, but others may not be. YSEALI will not be supporting the projects after they've had the kickstart. After the first, so actually, let me rephrase that. So Precious is, will YSEALI be supporting the project after they've gained the kickstart? YSEALI will be supporting in mentorship and support and helping you find additional sources of funding or writing letters of recommendation, etc. But there will not be additional funding for your YSEALI Seeds for the future project after the first year from YSEALI. But you could apply for alumni innovation funds or other State Department funding. We have a lot of costs under $50 per unit. That would be perfect if you put them all in workshop tools fee and then have a specific amount. And then for Thalaan's question. If we require program participants to fly to a particular country, can we include a travel subsidy for the participants? Certainly. You could also put their entire travel, since it's within ASEAN, as a aspect of your budget, as long as it doesn't get too long and too high. Budget narrative can be placed in the budget template or in the 5 pages. It depends on how many pages you have remaining in your 5 pages. Edmund's asking, can the product developed by Seeds be later turned into a commercial product? Yes, it can. That can go under economic growth or on entrepreneurship, essentially. Is a project budget of $3,000 too high? No, anything over $15,000 requested from YSEALI is too high, but otherwise, anything up to $15,000 is totally fine. Falzan, so many people are asking this about the budget narrative and budget description. You can put it in the budget spreadsheet after the budget template. That is okay too. What if hotel, flight, and accommodation during the event is the biggest part of the budget? Is Resky's question. Is that okay? That is okay, except you have to explain what the follow-on activities are going to be. Otherwise, it will seem like the project is a one-off project, and we wouldn't want that because we would want projects to be sustainable and replicable. Moving on to Thu's question. Our project has 2 phases. Can we apply for a second phase if we've already started the first one? Yes. In fact, one of our projects last year did this exact thing and showed how this project would grow through applying for YSEALI Seeds for the future. Amalong's asking about light equipment and construction materials, our biggest chunk of the budget. Without knowing too much, you have to explain why that is necessary and put in a real description of the large pieces of durable equipment. You don't necessarily need to, Hester, put the duties and responsibilities of each team member in the description, since it does take up a lot of words, but a good sheet or hack around it, which was suggested by Thuan earlier, was perhaps put it in your CV as a top line in the CV saying what the responsibilities of someone will be. Yes, all of those would be considered equipment, but large pieces of durable equipment. Do we need to show actual financial figures, or can we write a brief description is perfectly okay, Owen. And Edmund's asking, does YSEALI or Cultural Vistas own the copyright of the product development via the grant? No, you would still own the copyright, and only for the period of implementation, Edmund, you would have to have the State Department seal, YSEALI seal, and Cultural Vistas seal in part of the materials for it. But afterwards, it would be your own copyright. Artist fees can go in the budget, just shouldn't be too large a charge. And just for everyone's notice, we have about 10 minutes left in the webinar, 10 to 12 minutes. So keep getting your questions down. I'll try to get through all of them. Anto's question is about food budget for a workshop. There will be 150. Yes, that is totally okay. 3,600 for the total food cost. Just make sure that you can really make sure you can get 8 times the people to come to 8 different workshops. Sue's asking if you have to produce a PSA or communications asset that requires a lot of details. Do you need to break down the cost even if it may take up to more than 100 lines? No, but you should put it in your budget description why it's such a large cost that you're charging. So Amalong's asking about the process for selection. And this kind of goes with Lahout's question about what percentage will be accepted. First, there will be initial review by Cultural Vistas of all the applications we receive. Last year we received 400 applications. We're assuming we'll receive a little more this year, but who knows? And so from there, it'll be a first review by Cultural Vistas and then sent along to the embassies in the region and the U.S. Department of State for a second and third review. They will make a final decision from them, and up to 20 projects will be accepted. So it's a very difficult. There's few rounds, and it just makes it kind of really. You have to wow us in the application, and then people will be informed if they've been selected or denied in early January, and you won't hear anything until then. So I'll get back to Sri's question. Anyone born after November 1981? November 82 would be the eligibility for YSEALI Seeds because it's 35 this year in November rather than 36. So Hester's asking about the project abstract since it's only 100 words. I think this is a great question and something I would recommend to all of you to really take note of, because the project abstract is really the place where you can get your 100 words and share your story that you wouldn't do in your project description. So tell us in that 100 words, share and wow us why you're doing this idea. 100 words is very small. It's like a paragraph. But tell us the problem and what you're going to do and make us want to read your project description after it. Amalang's asking, Susanti's asking, is YSEALI sensitive to project related to government stakeholders or entities? Any boundaries regarding, for example, our project is related to empowering village-owned enterprise? That is okay. That would go under civic engagement, but you just need to be careful that it's not there. We can't fund any political activities in any way, as long as it's not funding any government agencies or political activities. That is okay. Do we encourage collaborating with government agencies? We encourage collaborating with any stakeholder that can make your project a success, Amalang. You can start working on the project before February and keep invoices to count in the budget. Perhaps the project funding timeline should really be from February to October, Manoram, so we would have to have a separate discussion on that, and you'd have to explain why and get a waiver for that, but it's perhaps a possibility. Can we apply for the grant for a current running project, or should it be a newly developed project? Our social mission has been running for 10 months, but it's not optimal yet because of lack of resources and capital. So that actually is a perfect question. So this project is for two different types of projects, and both are highly encouraged to apply equally. So it's either for projects that are a new idea that haven't even been started yet, or it's for projects like Falzan's, which are here currently, but want to go here, trying to go to that next level. And so for that, we encourage you to apply and explain why you need the YSEALI Seeds for the Future funding to grow your project. But that is highly encouraged. Do we have any more questions? I will keep the chat window open for another 2 minutes, but then if there aren't any other questions, we will get moving. Oh, I see now multiple attendees are asking. Perfect. And I hope this has been helpful. So Malang's asking, what wows the judges? How can you wow them? And I think I've said that a few times today. I think this is something that is so there are two different ways to wow me as a judge, I would say. I would say the first way is it's a really new, innovative idea. So if you go into the YSEALI Seeds for the Future website, you can see some of the projects from this past year. Bikes in Yangon, which was putting a bike sharing scheme within the school and within universities throughout Yangon, addressing a major problem, I thought was a really innovative and new idea. It was the first bike share schema in all of Myanmar, and I thought that was a great idea. That was a wow idea. The other thing that wows me is something that is so detailed and specific that I know is going to be done already. So if you're going to be doing a workshop through your project, if you kind of show us a time frame of who speakers are going to be, who is going to be invited, what days it's going to be, where it's going to be, and if you have all the details in place, that shows that it's feasible, and that's another thing that wows. Um, Lahoot's asking to provide detail of a project I really liked the most in application. I think Bikes in Yangon was a good example of that. The deadline, I believe, is using Jakarta time. It says directly on the application, Hester. What can support will you receive apart from capital for the grant? Mentorship, support, training, all of that you will receive. Food can be included within reasonable cost, Lucas. There is no requirement on font. Depends completely on your creativity. Just make sure it's readable. What does total cost share contribution mean on the budget template? This is a good question. So total cost share means what people other than YSEALI Seeds for the future will be putting in. So if your project's over it's over $15,000, then all of a sudden you have to explain where that money's coming from. So the total cost share is any money that isn't coming from YSEALI Seeds for the future that is going into your project. That is where you would put it on the budget template. Do we already have to establish branding, logos, websites as early as now? You don't have to, but the more you have early on shows how feasible it's going to be. Kopchai is asking, if not selected, will you allow us to ask reasons? I am not sure because I think because of the multi-level stakeholders involved, I think it's not any one person having an issue, but if you have questions about your application and you aren't selected, we'd be happy to talk to you about your application at yseali@culturalvistas.org. For activities outside of ASEAN, you cannot fund international travel that is outside of ASEAN. That is not fundable by this, but anything else within ASEAN is fundable. You can look at example projects on the YSEALI Seeds for the Future website. And can you try again next year if you're not selected? Certainly, you can totally do that. You can apply each year, and we encourage you to. Most of the projects that were selected this past year had applied in the previous years and weren't selected and refined their project and made them better. Okay, Antu's question, could we put different budget totals so there will be two templates? One, you can certainly do that, Anto. Do you need to submit receipts, especially for monthly reporting? Yes, and we will go over that in the Jakarta workshop with all the project teams about how to do reporting. Fuad, do you need to fill in any amount if your budget is less than $15,000? You do not need to. However, your project is encouraged to because that will make your project more sustainable, but also more feasible. It shows that there's more buy-in from your team. I think we have a couple more questions here. I hope all of you have really enjoyed this session. Oh, thank you guys so much. I think this one was very helpful for you, and I hope that I want to just give you guys some words of encouragement. Of the teams that were selected last year, most of the teams, Chen Yan, there is no font requirement. It is just based on your creativity, whatever you want. So what I was going to say is for most of your teams, you guys are having an advantage because you've now done this workshop and you've done this webinar. So most of the teams selected last year were teams that attended the webinars and watched the webinars so they could understand what was necessary for a good project. So I thank you guys for taking your time this evening, and you have kind of an advantage going into the application. So good luck. And so everyone who is in the YSEALI webinar or YSEALI email list gets this email and about this webinar. And so you guys were the 40 that showed up, so that's really encouraging for your applications. And so I wish you all luck, And I just want to say we'll get to most of it afterwards, and this session will be uploaded to YouTube later this evening. It needs to be recorded. So I wish you all luck, and I thank you all for joining me today. And and I wish you guys good luck in your submitting your application by Wednesday. Have a good night. Bye bye.